Welcome, dear listeners, to another exciting episode of Let's Discuss. I'm your host, Avi, and today we have a guest who is not just a legal rock star, but also a blockchain enthusiast. So buckle up because today we are diving into the world of smart contracts, crypto, and maybe turning legal babble into real gold. Our guest today is none other than Nirav Bakshi, the General Counsel at Blockchain Founders Fund. So, dear listeners, get ready to be entertained, enlightened, and possibly even inspired as we unravel the mysteries of law, venture capital, blockchain, and whatever else Nirav decides to sprinkle his magic on today. Nirav, thanks a lot for joining the podcast. For our listeners who don't know anything about you, would you want to give them an introduction of yourself?
No, sure. Thanks for having me, Avinash. I'm a lawyer by profession. Didn't start out like that. I started with doing economics and finance, and then moved to do law in the UK. Worked at Stephenson Howard for a year in their merger acquisitions team, and then came to India, did my law all over again. Joined General Merchant and Partners in their VC and private equity team. Was not that interested in that, so moved to fund formation at Trilegal. And then I joined Bombay Law Chambers doing investment funds and venture debt, private equity, venture capital, and M&A. And like about a year back, I moved in-house to Blockchain Founders Fund. I'm currently their General Counsel. It's been about a journey of about 7 or 8 years in the legal profession in the UK and India. That's what it's going great. And, hope to help the team deploy more and more capital and great companies going forward. But yeah.
Wow, great intro there, Nirav. Thanks a lot for that. And you touched upon your educational experience, and I wanted to go a little deeper in that. So how did it turn around,
Sure.
right? Because you have a little unique experience there. So how things spanned there?
The original plan was, I would say, very typically from, I don't want to say typical Indian family of sorts, but the thing is that either you're going into engineering, medicine, finance, and then you want to become an investment banker or a venture capitalist or a private equity investor, right? So the idea was to do a BSc in economic finance, continue that with an MBA, and then go into PVC sort of space or investment banking space. But I did a couple of internships and I just didn't like it. I didn't like the space, didn't like the culture, didn't like how things were there without, saying too much and naming too many people. So I decided to do something else. My dad comes from a law background. So that was something that sort of gravitated me towards law. And I was like, why not give it a shot at least? So I got into it and I really liked the aspect of understanding interpretation and, sort of giving guidance to people. And that's how it started. But I was very clear from the start that litigation is not something that, I'm cut out for at all. And therefore, I was very clear that I wanted to do corporate from the start and then stuck to that. In fact, in between both, I've actually had a very interesting sort of thing where I did a diploma in filmmaking as well, just as a break. But yeah, that was nothing serious. But yeah, it was a good sort of break from, I would say, reading and numbers, to be honest.
I can imagine. But you never know. One of my good friends who actually graduated from a national law school, he is actually now a filmmaker. So trust me, anything can happen. So yeah, thanks a lot for giving that context. So I'll start with a very easy question. What is the biggest legal complexity while working in the blockchain-based company?
But not per se a blockchain-based company, right? We're typically still a venture capital fund. So we still operate pretty much like that. In that sense, we don't have too much blockchain at our end, but we interact with companies and XYZ. The biggest challenge we see companies facing is on structuring, right? Because the moment you say blockchain, there is obviously an angle of some sort of tokens or coins or something like that. And in that sense, you have to be very careful in terms of where you incorporate, how to incorporate. Are things traceable back to you? Are you in the US? If you're in the US, then how do you insulate yourself and those kind of things? So legal complexities come more on the structuring side, and that usually comes because of the fact that there's so many tax issues attached to it. From my role, fortunately, I'm not involved in that because I wouldn't want to be, because I think it's a little above my pay grade at this point. Yes, we do advise companies on and off on what to do, but we don't really put our hands too much into it. But other than that, if it's, a service provider on a blockchain, there's not much regulatory challenges there. It's pretty typical of what you'd expect of a startup in any part of the world. What you understand when you're in my role is where actually there is ease of doing business and where there actually isn't ease of doing business. And that becomes very critical in terms of what I advise fund when they're making their investments because that directly impacts exits, or where the companies, if they want to reincorporate or are setting up a sub, if they should do it or not do it.
Wow. Can you help me understand, like, what is your typical day-to-day looks like?
So my typical day-to-day would be, it would involve, either drafting or reviewing investment documents, which either we are sending out or we receive from our portfolio companies, mapping them out with term sheets or commercial terms that have been agreed by the investment team. That takes up, I would think, most of my day. Also, obviously, that includes, certain calls that I have to do with the portfolio companies or prospective portfolio companies, negotiating transactions or negotiating deals, because sometimes they're not comfortable with certain language or certain rights, give them some comfort around it. The fund also has a venture program of sorts attached to it as, like an accelerator of sorts, where we help our companies in navigating their legal issues. So there could be calls that happen with the portfolio company founders where they have gotten certain agreements, which I help them out with, either editing, drafting, negotiating, etc. Small part of my role, because of my background also, is in finance, where I look at, the NAV of the fund, the capital deployed, how much is pending, how much we have, how much runway we have, and the next capital call needs to be made, things like that. So that's typically how my day pans out. And, obviously you have to sit in on a couple of investment committee meetings as well. So providing inputs that where there are legal and compliance or risks in the investments as well, that while everything else may be good, are we tripping up any other wire, or is there any wire that likely to be tripped up in the future that could hamper our position in the company? So that's typically how my day looks like.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You don't take part in deciding whether the money should be invested or not by the fund.
No.
Right.
So the only place where that decision comes into my court is if I see a legal risk which we're not able to cover for through documentation. Like if there is a possibility through diligence we find, like an inter-founder dispute, for example, that could happen, right? Because either the founders left or have some sort of history, there is something on record that we've seen through our diligence that's not okay, then I would be like, you guys can still do it, but I don't think we should do it. Then I'm against it. Yeah, I'm against this deal. Yeah.
Only in extreme cases where there's some kind of a legal risk involved, you will be consulted in that regard, right? Is my understanding?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if there's a regulatory risk also, right? Like, for example, we're not able to sort of ascertain that the founder still has shares. Like a unique situation would be like a founder in India and set up a company abroad. Due to our ODI restrictions, we're not able to send money outside. And the founder saying that, okay, I'm going to get these shares somehow, but I'm not going to be okay with it. Because we're becoming so early stage, right? If there's an exit tomorrow, the exit will happen in short term and is unlikely to be able to fix that. And in that case, no PE investor worth their salt is going to touch that company.
Yeah, completely agree there. So what's the position with Blockchain Founders Fund right now? Are they investing solely in blockchain, or they are diversifying in Web3, or now obviously with, AI coming the new buzzword? What's the investment scenario there?
If you see our portfolio currently, it's a mix of Web 2.5, Web 3 blockchain. But I would say the team's core competency remains in blockchain and crypto. So, we are going a little bit more token heavy on our transactions at this point. We obviously look at AI and Web3 as a whole as well. But considering we're moving a little bit later to our fund life, our focus is going to what our core competency is at this point. But yeah, we don't typically invest in very traditional or SaaS-based companies or those kind of things. Like there has to have some sort of at least a Web3 angle, if not a blockchain angle.
Makes sense. So what kind of amazing startups you're looking at, especially in the legal tech sector? Do you have any interesting stories there?
We're not looking at any legal tech sort of startups to invest, but personally, I think I've read a few products when I was at my previous law firm. I think Mike Legal being one of them, and I think their product is quite phenomenal in that sense. I think the pricing is a little high, but I think for the product that they're offering, I think it's
that's the case with every good legal tech product. Everybody I interview, the product is good, but the pricing is really high. And I'll tell you, as a tech co-founder, it's because of you guys. It's so hard. The deal cycle for lawyers is so long. It just doesn't make sense to sell you guys at a reasonable rate.
No, I completely understand. Unfortunately, at my previous job, I was not in a position to sort of take those calls. I was just a senior associate. But I thought that it's something that, negotiate beyond a point or something out of my sort of domain. So I told my partner that, look, it's up to you at this point. I'm out of this discussion because I can't negotiate further. I think I just feel cheap after a point.
There's no shame in that.
So, but no, I think my theory was one, and I think there was one more. I can't recall the name at the top of my head. The integration into Microsoft Word was like phenomenal. If I do recall the name, like I'll let you know. But like that was one product. But in legal tech, beyond that, I've not really used much. I've tried using ChatGPT to be honest for a few things, but I think at least from an Indian law angle, it's useless to be honest. Still, because I don't think the data is there yet.
So, Nirav, now let me ask you a little controversial question. So,
Sure.
especially you guys are in the business of deciding who gets to live in the blockchain world or the Web3 world. Do you think something went wrong? A lot of people would argue that blockchain was a fad. What are your thoughts on that?
The problem with how the market perceives blockchain is that because of the volatility of the open market, right? Because there is a shadow market that is created with all these coins and tokens, right? And that becomes your indicator of where blockchain tech is going. Because of its high volatility, it will always feel like a fad. Typically, when we study economics, right, we have these cycles that we are able to then anticipate where the economy is going and when recession is going to hit and when it's going to come out and where that trough is and where the peaks are. The same thing is there with blockchain, right? And it's just that those troughs and peaks look like a heart rate monitor rather than a sine wave. And that's what results in people thinking it's a fad, that oh, it's going to crash, it's gone, and it's never going to come back. But it always comes back. I mean, we're not that big a fund that we're able to decide who lives and who dies, but like being early backers of companies, I think we're able to catch the pulse of where things are right and where things are wrong. Because our focus is obviously like on one, the core product, and second, on the founder themselves. In that sense, we're able to like sort of filter out a lot of the noise, so as to speak, that I would think that people who are not in sync with blockchain day in, day out get on their newsfeed. Like you look at something like, some of the publications on blockchain that are around. Now you'll see just good things being published, and maybe 3 months ago, there was just like all negative news being published. So it's just how it is, unfortunately. Till people don't get an understanding, I would think, of blockchain, like how people got an understanding of the internet back in the day. I think we're always going to think that blockchain is a fad. But honestly speaking, like the use cases of blockchain are so much. I think it's far from being a fad. Like we're seeing situations now in which companies are coming up which are actually allowing you to earn yield on your holdings, much like typical investment, just in the coin space, on the token space. You're having that crossover happen, and I think as more and more of these use cases come up, I think people will start to understand that this is more as an alternative or substitute rather than a replacement, I would think. Because I don't think traditional markets can ever really be replaced.
Great insights there. So I have two follow-up questions. So my first follow-up question, because you have been like really, seeing a lot of startups in this space.
Yeah.
So according to you, what is the best use case of blockchain technology? My second follow-up question would be, what are your thoughts on stable coins vis-a-vis the regular coins that we have?
I think it would be unfair of me to go on record and say what the best use case is, to be honest. But like, what is
the personal best? What is the personal opinion on that? Like why all lawyers are so diplomatic? Let's make a controversy for once.
That's a long topic possibly for another day, but I think my personal favorite use case of blockchain would be in two things, right? And it just depends on the problem statement. If I was taking India as a whole as a problem, right, there are a lot of problems. But I would say one critical thing, and having dealt with it personally at my end and my family and all, is real estate. If real estate ownership can be actually validly put on a blockchain and authenticated in the manner that blockchain does seek to authenticate, I think a lot of the problems that we have of going to the SARMAR are trying to remove that, seeing if it's right, update it, not update it, is it matching with the sale deed that you have, and those kinds of things. I want to put it as a technical term that we use, like tokenization of real world assets, effectively, right? Is a fabulous use case for blockchain.
I completely agree with you, and I'll come back to the stable coin, your thoughts on stable coin. But my question to this would be, like, on top of my head, I think two people are working on this. One is Mr. Rohas Nagpal from, I'm sure, like, you must have also done the cyber law diploma from ASCL, right? So
no, I've not actually, but no.
Can do, right? I think right. So, like in my generation of lawyer, I don't know anyone who hasn't done a cyber law diploma from ASCL. At least the year that I graduated from law college, I think even a couple of years later that. now we used to call it like COVID of law courses. So it's really spread in every corner of India. So yeah, so Mr. Rose Lakpal, I think, has been working on this. And then there's another startup which is called Landed, I think, if I'm correct. They are trying to basically digitize the records. One of the use cases that you mentioned is for putting a land record on blockchain. Some people would argue that just digitizing is more than enough. Why do you need a system that works on zero trust, basically? Why can't we just digitize the land records and call it a day?
I think there's two things, right? So like when I talk about tokenization of real world assets, I take actually the argument a little further than digitizing. Because when you're digitizing assets, your transactions, when they happen, they're still happening in a very traditional, typical format where you have to, still go to the registry, get things signed, still execute, scan, and then upload, and then it becomes sort of a digitized thing. Because unfortunately in India, we're still not that comfortable with electronic signatures, even though we have a provision of an e-sign in our IT. That is one aspect. Now, when you take it a step forward or tokenization of that asset, your property transactions today are so difficult and so expensive in India to do because of diligence issues and everything, that if all of this data is on a blockchain, right, which is then backed by a token of that particular real estate asset, which you can then go and sell, the number of property transactions and the speed at which you're able to do it will increase multifold. Because there's a zero trust system, you are absolutely sure that what you're buying is what you're getting, because everything is happening real time in the back. All the records are getting updated in real time. You've literally got, let's say, the token which evidences your ownership of that particular piece of land or the flat or whatever. Everything is happening in real time. You're able to transmit that money, hopefully one day, blockchain tech or stablecoin, as you said, right, for that property. And everything is done without any hassle because everything was there in that zero trust system. In a centralized system where there is somebody controlling a database, there is still room for one error and second room for tampering, which gets resolved in these kind of zero trust is what I no, like I think yes, step one is digitizing, and after that these things can follow, because right now we're struggling with digitizing the record. So this is to I would think very far away for an economy like India right now.
Thanks for sharing your insights there. Right. Now coming to the second question, what are your thoughts on stablecoin? What do you see there?
See, stable coins, I think I view them as just another form of currency, to be fairly honest, because in fact, the first, and I don't know if it's still the only one, but for the longest time, I think the last 3 years or so, Blockchain Founders Fund was the only fund which was registered with the MAS, which is allowed to accept stable coins or capital contributions from our LPs. I would think that the regulator, has given us the blessing to do so. I think we should go with that interpretation, where I think stable coins are nothing but a form of a particular type of currency available on mainnet chain. That's all that there is. I don't think there's anything more or less to it, because, I mean, even when we record our thing internally, the commitment side, there are fluctuations on USDT to USDT versus USD, but we don't. We just record it like that is flat, because it is what it is. There's literally nothing there in that sense. Like, I think they're just a different form of currency.
Right. Now these things have been taken care of. Now let's get into the heart of the podcast, which is unfortunately again the buzzword of last year. Definitely was ChatGPT and generating AI. So what was your initial impression when this technology came out?
I tried using ChatGPT 3. I think it was pretty average and basic at that time, and it kind of put me off because it was hyped so much. So I didn't use it at all till ChatGPT 4 came out. And luckily we at the fund have a subscription of ChatGPT 4. So I started using it then. When I started using it there is when I realized what the real potential of this software is. I can literally tell it to calculate the volatility of the top 120 coins, by uploading an Excel on it, and it does it within seconds or minutes. And I don't need to know finance. I don't need to know Black-Scholes. I don't need to know anything. It just does it. Right, and because it's mathematics, it's not like asking it for case law where it's right or wrong, or it's like a made up case or whatever, right? It's math, and that's what this system has been designed to do, execute mathematical formulas at the end of the day. So in that sense, it was eye opening for me that how good this entire system is, and I still don't think that it's a system where it will replace people, but I think that if used correctly, it can generate a lot of efficiencies in the workplace.
Okay. So that brings me to the next question. Someone who's working in a company, where do you think this technology has the best potential of being implemented?
See, I think in our setup, it gets used a lot for, I would think, on the marketing side to even generate some sort of caption or generate some sort of buzz, or sometimes even when you have writer's block in terms of crafting memos or things like that. So in that sense, it becomes a very good tool to plug the holes for us. I think greatest thing would be once it evolves a bit more and is able to accept data in a little bit more raw format. Right now, I sort of realized when I was doing my NEV modeling and things like that, that you still have to put in data in a certain manner for it to understand and do some calculations. And I think it evolved. I think processing of voluminous raw data is where I think this tool is really going to shine. Right? I think AI, like image generation and video generation and all that, sure, it's going to be there, but I think nothing is really ever going to replace actual creativity in that sense. But processing of voluminous data that requires a lot of man hours to do, or for you to write millions of lines of code to create a software could do it. I think this is a good solution for that.
Right. So any specific tool or any specific instance that you can remember where you felt that, oh God, this AI is really going to take over the world?
I wouldn't say that take over is possibly an extreme. No, I don't think. I think that's an extreme.
Right.
But I feel that as it gets smarter and smarter, it's going to be able to do a lot of the tasks, I would think, automatedly. Right? And I think that's where I think it gets a little risky. And it gets risky because we will start increasing reliance on it. Much like how we have reliance on every other equipment in our kitchen, right? That tomorrow the microwave breaks down, we don't know how to eat food. Let's be very honest. Nobody thinks that, we can just put it in a steam sort of a situation and the food will get heated. Same way it gets heated in a microwave, right? Nobody thinks about it. Right? So we get handicapped. That's my concern, that once the dependency increases, and this is what I see, when we have interns, or, when I have had interns or juniors in my other law firm, that the knee-jerk reaction is, I'll just look it up on ChatGPT. It sort of become an alternate or just substitute for Google. Dangerously so, because Google just gives you raw data. You still need to look at the raw data. Here it just gives you answer straight away. So my concern is around that. It will become a source of information which may become gospel, which may not be entirely true. That is my issue with this system.
That's quite a valid concern, right? Because, we stopped remembering phone numbers when smartphone became omnipresent. So how would you advise the younger lawyers to not become so dependent on this new technology?
The technology is good to be used where it can be used, right? Let's say you're struggling with a specific clause in an agreement. You can tell ChatGPT to craft a clause for you and it will give you a pretty decent result. Okay, I've also done it. I'm not going to shy away from the fact that I like craft perfect clauses every single time. I've used ChatGPT to do it. And it does a pretty decent job at it. But when it comes to ground research, right? Or let's say understanding what a case law, for example, you shouldn't be putting a case law into ChatGPT and tell them that give me a fire act of so and so case. That's just that's never going to really substitute reading the actual case, because it's never going to give you the understanding of the law. Right. Secondly, going into ChatGPT and saying, especially, and this is more true for Indian law than anything else, is because that system is not developed yet. It may not even give you the right data, right? A lot of right case law. I know ChatGPT failed multiple counts for me where I've tried to get case law from India. It's good for certain things. Don't depend on ChatGPT to draft entire agreements. I don't think it still does it. I don't think it's ever going to do it. Maybe there'll be an add-on plugin that's at some point which allows you to generate full 50, 60-page documents. When I tried doing it just for fun, it still generates documents that are very US typical, not India typical.
Right. Because that's where the data is, right? And that's where the majority of the data has come in.
Correct. Your language learning model is from the US. That's where it is. That's
in terms of contracts, especially because that's where the publicly available contracts are there. Like if you look at how many publicly available contracts of Indian origin are there on the internet, there are very few. Vis-a-vis if you look at the huge amount of contracts data that is available on internet of US companies. So that's what they caught and that's what they, trained on.
Yeah. And absolutely. And I think that's a very good thing because you're able to pick out clauses from those agreements which have been around for so long and have stood the test of time, which you can implement in your own contracts in India. And they're pretty much enforceable because both are common law countries at the end of the day. So in that sense, it's great. But don't be over-reliant on using these tools because they're not perfect. You'll end up in a mess. Honestly, it's gotten to a point where even at our end, right, we've gotten feedback from some of our portfolio companies, straw venture programs, that they've said that the answers that some of the people provide are very ChatGPT-esque, right? No, people are realizing that what's coming out of ChatGPT's mouths. Let's be very honest. People are not stupid.
Nirav, you are a gem. Thank you for joining us today. And to our listeners, stay tuned for the second part of this podcast and more legal adventures. Until next time, this is Avinash signing off.